Welcome to Mondays with Maya. Hi everybody. I have a super excitement to share with you. I'm sitting here with this incredible, unique character, Jason Silva. Hello, Jason.
Hey, thanks for having me on your program.
Thank you for being here and sharing your knowledge of science with the yoga crowd.
Yes.
I mean, of course, always spirituality and science has link, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more.
Definitely. I think it was Einstein who talked about the importance of keeping a relationship with the mysterious, right?
Right.
And so I think that people who do yoga or meditation or otherwise are people that are comfortable probing the mysteries of their own consciousness, which science hasn't yet quite demystified or deconstructed effectively. So
do you think that will happen soon?
I don't know. I think it's going to be weird and trippy if we ever make sense of consciousness, just because of the very nature of what self-awareness is. Like a mind that is aware that it's a mind that is aware that it's aware. I mean, we're
Right.
self-reflexive, looping, recursive creatures. Douglas Hofstadter, in his book Gödel Escher Bach, said that the best metaphor to describe self-awareness is to think of the brains as sort of a media or a hard drive that stores patterns
Right.
that mirror and model the external world. But in making a very complete model of the external world, you have to make a model of the very brain that's in that world modeling that world. Do you understand?
Okay.
So it creates an inevitable vortex of self-mirroring, and eventually a real causal I or a sentient mind emerges from that. But think of how powerful that image is. So the brain is media that stores patterns that mirror the world. But that world that I'm modeling includes me making the modeling. So that's where the recursive loop of consciousness
But you
happens.
think we can break the patterns and change them? Like create different programming and get into another program?
Well, one of the things that we do is that we model the world, but we also can conjure up mental models of how the world could be and then set out to pull the present forward to meet those future possibilities. I mean, that's where imagination and the neocortex and the capacity to think about the future comes from. But that's also a source of our greatest anxiety, because in thinking about the future, we can also conceive of our own non-being. And for sentience, conceiving of its absence is the beginning of existential terror.
I don't know about you, but in my day, science was not sexy, and he makes it sexy, and this is so cool.
I appreciate that.
So what is your new passion at the moment? What is it you're working on? What is the excitement?
I'm passionate about a line that David Lenson wrote about in a book called On Drugs. It's about the human relationship to altered states of consciousness, and he says that what the human being wants is stewardship of internal life. So you have to remember our mind's eye, our unique POV on the world, our phenomenological theater, our subjective point of view, again, is all we have and all we are. Eric Davis calls it the evanescent flux of sensation and perception that is all we have and all we are. And stewardship of that subjective perspective is the goal, to be the captain of your soul, right? Because reality is coupled to perception. So if you can mediate perception, you win. Because you control perception, you control reality. We all see the world through our own little lens. Yes, there's some kind of consensus required.
The lens? Can you just like...
Well, of course. I mean, yeah, but my goal is to effectively mediate my perception so that I can have certain interpretive frameworks that serve me when things become difficult. Because when things are great, it's easy to be happy. It's easy to be elated when everything is serving your goals or values or passion or purpose. It's when shit goes awry. It's when the politics get toxic. It's when you hear about violence or epidemics across the world or rising xenophobia. Then it's like, whoa, how can I interpret this in a way that serves me, my passion, my purpose, and my goal is to make a meaningful contribution in the world? How do I not succumb to despair when my thoughts are betraying me, when the signals are not serving me?
Despair and anxiety attacks, you have those? I mean, I think we all have, especially after the election. I mean, it's been crazy. Everybody's asking me how to deal with the stress and panic attacks and fear.
Sure.
Well, how do you deal with it?
I'm struggling.
How do you?
Kierkegaard says that anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. So it's the paralysis of choice. It's like, well, what do I do? You know, as meaning-making agencies with volition, which is what we are, we can go get up and go do something with our lives. We can go build, we can go create, we can go participate in the world through this sense of volition and agency, the sense of will that we have. But where do we direct that will and that agency? Do I go become a scientist? Do I go become an activist? Do I run for office? Do I move to some uninhabited island with a lover?
You decide that, or is it that extra factor? I always believe there is something else there, the field of consciousness, or something that you tune in.
Yes, and maybe there is and maybe there isn't, and maybe it's just our intuition, and maybe our intuition is just our subconscious sense of direction, or the sum of our experiences that maybe we're not fully aware of, but that somehow our mind taps into when we connect with our subconscious.
I just want to believe that that's a possibility.
Yeah, well, you know, human beings, the brain is a goal-seeking mechanism that works through connecting the dots. To understand is to perceive patterns. So we connect the dots, we see the gestalt, we see the pattern that works and that serves us to survive and reproduce, and that's how we function in the world. But because we live in this like symbolic reality, this symbolic construct, this consensual hallucination called culture that has values and that has morals and that governs behavior, that is responsible for the kind of massive cooperation and collaboration that allowed us to build pyramids and structures and the internet and electricity. This is all because of consensus. And the consensus is the consensual hallucination that Robert Anton Wilson and Timothy Leary talked about. And so it serves us to believe together, because that's collaboration can only come when we both agree on something.
So
yes, but it doesn't mean that any of those things are true. Like, money is only real because we believe in it, but money is a construct.
Right.
You know, the value that we ascribe to that is an invention.
Okay, so let's go back to the patterns. Like, a lot of times we have, I mean, the immediate patterns that we receive is from our mothers and our fathers, right? So where is that ancestral tree going? I mean, there are certain things that you can be aware of and cut and remove if you don't think it serves you positively. Do you believe in that?
Yes. Well, I think what you're talking about is the interpretive frameworks that we use to make sense of the signals that come in on a daily basis.
Okay,
so
you can
it's
look
like
at it that way.
I could believe the world is going to hell and that it's all hopeless based on what I see on the news, which itself is a machinery that feeds on our attention, and therefore it is in the interest of the news media to keep us scared because we pay more attention to what frightens us, etc. And then I could just become a nihilist because of that, or I could choose an interpretive framework that says I choose to go and participate in a meaningful way in the world as a response to the nihilism that I'm seeing on the news.
I again get lots of requests. People ask me about relationships. Okay, everybody is struggling. Why are we struggling so much? Why are we arguing all the time? What is that it's like that whole line of being right or happy. It just doesn't allow us to accept the other person or accept yourself, or you always have to be the right one.
Well,
and your opinion means
I've done a lot of videos about romance and love and relationships, and the literature that I've come across, the theory that resonates the most with me, not just because I'm a romantic, but because it actually makes sense, is Ernest Becker's ideas about romance. He says that same impulse that we have towards religiosity, towards believing in the transcendent, in the magical, is a response to the anxiety of meaninglessness that afflicts an animal as bright as us who can foresee its own mortality. And therefore, the religious impulse, the religious construct, just like the romantic construct, is a defense mechanism against despair. Now, for a while, the vast majority of people were just told, believe there's a God, you'll go to heaven, so on and so forth. But secularism has created a crack in that. Now, that magical thinking has persisted, maybe now we don't get it from the church, but we still get it from our ayahuasca ceremonies. So even in increasingly secular times, we still turn to this religiosity, even if we mediate it through psychedelics, because to feel a connection with something larger than ourselves is ultimately, again, an antidote to despair. And I think that romantic love is like the religious construct, a
God,
something that we turn to by deifying our lovers. Then consummation with said lovers provides a temporary antidote against despair.
That's a beautiful way to look at it.
Well, when you're a little kid, your parents are gods, and when you get older, you realize they're just
that's a
humans.
New concept. I love that.
So then you find a girlfriend, and you believe that she will be the key to everlasting happiness until your lovers reveal their clay feet, as
But
they
isn't the key in
inevitably
you?
do.
First of all, you have to love that love has to be towards yourself in order to find that person who also loves themselves that much, and then together it's just a bonus.
Yes. But I think, just because you know that movies, for example, are 24 frames per second, still images, there's no real motion, it's not really happening. When the movie is good, you forget that. You choose to forget it. You suspend disbelief, and then all of a sudden you're lost in the fantasy. You transcend yourself, and you get that satiating satisfaction from
so at
cinema.
which point
and
that
I think
stops?
it's the same with love. Just because we know that romantic love is of the highest, Romeo and Juliet style, is a construct that allows us to have religious consummation with a mortal being. Just because we know how the trick works doesn't make its effects any less magical. I always tell my lovers, lie to me, but lie to me well.
But I'm saying,
art is the lie that reveals the truth.
At which point that becomes like, oh, reality is not what I meant. It's not that God that I thought that she is. Or at which point do you argue? I mean, do you come into arguments, confrontations? Is that something?
I think that's why people break up. They don't always admit it, but the breakup begins when the halo dissipates.
Exactly.
When the supernatural effects of the relationship.
So the infatuation stage finish.
Yeah, and we know that that's all mediated by dopamine in the brain anyway. But yes, it's the inability to bear love's aging, which I can definitely relate to. But we can, I don't want to say artificially, but we can use our volition and will to artificially recharge the experience. Novelty also gets our dopamine flowing. So if love has grown stale, you can go travel around the world with your lover. Believe me, it'll become re-energized by the radical new environment. So I think sometimes insights into our own neurochemistry gives us the possibility of manipulating said neurochemistry to serve us the necessary illusions that we need in order to live.
But then what about, in that case, if you believe so then you'll be in search constantly and a new person, because the dopamine of the novelty becomes so exciting.
Yes.
So then what about staying with one person and going through all the stages with that one person?
I think it can happen if that person and you share a lot of passions and are evolving and growing at similar rates, because then you're both changing. And therefore, you both get to discover new things about each other constantly that keeps the excitement and novelty alive. I mean, there's other biochemistry eventually that also plays a role. There's the chemistry of attachment and oxytocin that starts to get released eventually. And that's not so much to do with novelty. That has to do with attachment. That's there to make sure you stick together when you raise the kid. But you can play with that as well. One of the ways that I used to manipulate myself into believing in the illusion, because again, the illusion is real. The dream is real when you're in it. It's only when you wake up that you realize something was off. But I don't care. I'll stay in the dream as long as possible. One of the ways I used to do it is I love video, and I love the idea of manipulating my own emotions with video. I practice a lot of self-deceit, and I'm okay with that. So I used to always videotape my lovers. Whenever I was in love with a girl, I take a lot of pictures, I make a lot of videos, and then I edit them with really, really sad, melancholic music. And I would watch that as a way of making myself feel the loss of this person before I had lost them. Because you know how they say you don't appreciate what you have until it's gone? That's when everybody really appreciates what they had, and then they lose the person. They're like, oh my God, I can't believe I was with it.
But you've already been there, so
I'll trick my brain into experiencing that mourning for the person while they're still in my life. So then I can appreciate them with the intensity with which I would if I had lost them.
But isn't that controlling?
Yes. But so what?
Well, I'm going to leave you there with a little exercise that I think it helps
Okay.
with all the relationship arguments.
Okay, what is it?
But just stand in the Vitruvian man position. Okay, you can stand up, but now that's what it is. The Da Vinci. Just completely open up
Yeah.
and stretch out, but stretch your fingers completely, get that energy going, and on the other side, open like that. And when you do that,
Yeah.
how can you be arguing? How can you say bad
I do
words? It's
feel
just like,
better.
immediately you just get out of that system.
Well, yeah, but that's your version of being a control freak as well. You're saying,
Of
well,
course.
posture changes biochemistry, which in turn changes the frame of
But
reference.
it does work like that.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, and people who are out there willing to try,
Well,
it seems like...
here's a good metaphor. Think of our self systems as a sound recording studio with 1,000 little knobs and levers.
Yes.
And similar to editing a film, the sound recording studio, you have the audio engineer who's tweaking 1,000 and different settings and buttons to really create his masterpiece. It's the stewardship of internal life. In his case, the perfect melody, the music is going to be like this, the drums are going to come in right here, the percussion, the guitar is going to be like that. So think of
Right.
Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys,
Yeah.
right? Sitting there playing around when he created the orchestrations for a song like God Only Knows. Now, the fact that he was later diagnosed as bipolar and quasi-schizophrenic, par for the course, right? All creative people sometimes are hit by a bit of madness, unfortunately. But again, our self-systems are like the knobs and levers of a recording studio. Knowing that, why would you settle for anything less than being an audio engineer of your own experience? Like to be an editor, a director, a choreographer of your own self-system. Because if you can become effective at that, if you become like a kung fu guy at that, you're fucking Neo in the Matrix.
Yeah. Oh, I love that movie.
Me too.
Right, we leave you with that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jason. You're so
Thank you.
amazing.
No, you are.
Speak to you later. Bye.